Hello, I'm Andrew Gemmell, and I've been filming weddings, parties and events since 1991. Things have changed quite a lot in the last few years. Ideas, locations, and indeed budgets have become more extravagant and grand over the years, certainly since I've been filming. I am delighted to be hosting a series of films interviewing the greats of the industry, those who are looked upon as the inspiration and the very reason as to why we have such a vibrant private event industry in the UK today. We are here in Spencer House, a magnificent venue in the heart of London and very close to St James's Palace. And I am delighted to be joined by Johnny Roxburgh. Johnny is quite literally one of the originals. At a time when you could count the number of well-known party planners on one hand, he was there. His ideas and creativity have allowed him to ride the crest of a wave and be at the very top of his game for the last 40 years. His name is known and revered throughout the industry, and his ideas and creations, well, something that just every newcomer aspires to emulate. Johnny, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here at Spencer House. Could you just tell us a little bit as to why we are here in Spencer House in this particular week?
Well, first of all, your introduction was, I really hardly recognized the person you were talking about. It seemed incredibly flattering, so thank you. We're here in Spencer House because I have a client who comes from America, and we looked at all kinds of places to have their child's wedding, and I kept my powder dry, and I took them to lots of different venues, but secretly I knew that Spencer House was the best place for them to come. And so right at the end of a long day of going around venues, we arrived here. It's the most, I mean, look around it, it's the most beautiful place in London. And in fact, I'm having my own birthday party here in 3 months.
You're 70?
Thank you for reminding me of that.
Well, you're celebrating it.
I am celebrating. But it's fantastic. And they've just recently spent, I think, 13 million in the last couple of months restoring even more of it. But I came here a long time ago. I would think early 90s. It was occupied by the coal board, and it just had funny wooden panels on the ceiling, and you couldn't see any of this stuff. And I came with Liz Anson, who was the other sort of great legend in the game, and she said to me, "Do you think we could ever have parties in this place?" And I said, "Well, I suppose so." Jacob Rothschild at that stage had not done any of the restoration. And so I was right at the beginning of this being a venue for celebrations. And I've done lots of parties here.
That's wonderful. So, I mean, you mentioned you're 70, but you've now been doing this for 40 years. What were you doing before? What was your kind of life up until venturing into the planning?
But it seems rather unlikely that I was a chartered accountant. And I qualified in Scotland, and then I did international copyright royalty accounting. Did that in London. But that gave me a taste. I looked after people like Bob Marley, ABBA, blah, blah, blah. But I travelled all over the world, making sure they were being paid the right amount of money for their royalties. And I was travelling all over the world, and I learned about 5-star hotels very early on. And I've kept on doing that. I've kept on going to 5 stars for all my meetings and that sort of thing, which gives you a great insight into how the rich live. I don't believe you can actually give the rich, who are the people one wants to have as clients, you can't give them what they want unless you experience it and you know how it all happens. I've been staying in a hotel in Scotland this last week, and they say it's a 5-star hotel. Believe me, it was not a 5-star hotel.
Tell me, was accountancy something you felt you had to go and do to appease your parents, or what was the transitional period for you from going to...
Well, I wanted to do textile design, and my father said no. He said, my father was a lawyer. He said, you've got to have a proper job, and you either have to do law or accountancy. And I was going out for dinner, I tossed a coin, heads accountancy, tails law, and it came down so that I did accountancy. And then by chance, I finished up doing law at university as well, so it was all part of the same thing. And I had no desire to do it. I mean, absolutely no desire. And I found quite a lot of it really quite confusing. But I qualified, which was good. And then I went off to Africa. I lived in Africa for a bit. And then I came back and I went to work for Story Hayward, who were a big firm of accountants. They're called something else now. And they said to me, we're going to start doing international copyright, looking after all these pop stars. Would you like to be the person that is in charge of it all? Nobody else had done it. And I started off, and it just went. But then one day, I was doing a very big case for, I can't tell you who it is on camera, but he got 14 million and I got a handshake, and I thought, enough. And I went and saw the father of a great friend, and he said, you always give amazing parties, why don't you try doing that? I said, nobody will ever use me to organise their parties. And he said, you're wrong. And then I met Rodin, who was my business partner. We did a very brave strategy.
Yeah, you told me about this. You've told me about this strategy where you basically turned down everything for 3 to 6 months.
For 6 months, every time the phone rang, I said, I'm really sorry, but we're fully booked.
Without any work on?
We had no work on. We had no money in the bank. We hadn't a clue what we were doing. We had to draw a circle on the ground and put the dining room chairs around it to see what you could get around a 4-foot round table. So when we got to the stage that we were ready to roll, everyone was saying, the company was called the Admirable Crichton, and they said, these guys must be so good because you can never get them. We hadn't done a thing, but we learned, and we were both not stupid.
Very clever strategy.
It was brave.
And that was the start of the Admirable Crichton.
The start in 1981.
And the Admirable Crichton became the leaders. I mean, well, your name was synonymous with the Admirable Crichton. I mean, you kind of, your creativity and your ideas led it to great heights.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think it was also, it became the yardstick that everybody else measured themselves against. And but it wasn't always easy. But
what were some of those key moments in the early days when you thought, yes, this has actually got legs. This is going to work?
Well, I tell you one of them. There was a company who no longer exists called LHW. And I don't know if you know Mr. Fezziwig's bull in A Christmas Carol, but there's a great scene in that where they, at Christmas, they have packing cases all around the room and blah, blah, blah. And he gives all his staff a bull. Anyway, I said to these people, why don't we recreate that? And there's a place called Cadafan Hall, now no longer exists. And it had a beam ceiling, and I hung from the ceiling dead birds in the feather and rabbits and hares and all kinds of stuff. But what I hadn't realized was that when you hang a rabbit, it not only bleeds through its mouth, it bleeds through its ears. And so we had these things hanging up, and suddenly I saw spots of blood coming. So out with the ladder and the Kleenex, and we sorted it out. But that overnight put us on the map.
Wow.
And that was fun.
And in the early days, how many people did you start off with? It was just you and Rolene plus?
Oh, there were 2 of us. We worked in a little tiny coach house that was 10 feet wide and 40 feet long. I sat with, which I thought was incredibly grand, a 1-line memory typewriter. And I was in the conservatory. The paper was always damp, and you put it into the typewriter and it would jam. But we did extraordinary things. We did the opening of Harvey Nichols' Zone. Now there was a learning curve. 5,000 people, which is a lot. Harvey Nichols' Zone is in the basement. It no longer exists, but it was touch dry when we got there. And we were doing canapes, what they now call bowl food, and a sort of breakfast canapes. We had no idea about porters to clear anything, so all the dirty plates were just put into the fitting rooms and drew the curtain over them. And we put all the laundry into black plastic bags. And the cleaners came in the next day and threw the whole lot out. I was glad I was insured. I can tell you one of the extraordinary moments was in this very room. We did a Christmas dinner for Jacob Rothschild, and in this room we had dining room tables, and then a pole through the middle of them, and then on top of them were real Christmas trees, and then running round the Christmas trees were toy trains. There were 60, I remember it so well.
I knew you were one of the reasons why you started the Planning Puppy was because someone came to you and said you're very good at planning parties, as you just said. But what makes a good party?
The people, without a shadow of a doubt. You can rent the most glamorous setting in the world. You can have the finest catering. You can give them the best food. Music helps a lot. But if you have really dull, boring people, you might as well take your money and shred it and put it in the gutter. And also, I think what makes them is a good host. When you go to a drinks party and you get there and there's no one to greet you, I think that's just really pants. And then you also need to have somebody that says, come and let me introduce you to so-and-so. You're taken to meet 2 more people, and you're just given 5 minutes with them, and you grab somebody else and you take them to you have to stir people up. Anybody that thinks it happens by itself is wrong. You have to, and the host and hostess should never drink. They should never, ever drink. You need to be stone cold sober, and you can get plastered at the end of it, but you need to be really working in the room to make it work. And of course it helps if you have dreadful food, if you have but I don't think the location matters so much, because you could be in a disused warehouse somewhere and it can still be enormous fun.
But how have things changed? Because obviously, as I said in my opening remarks, budgets have changed dramatically. The whole concept of making parties, of giving parties, has changed dramatically. People give far more often and spend far more on it. What are they looking for these days compared to what they were in the early days?
I am not sure that they do spend more money. Some people spend more money, but there are lots of people who don't spend as much as they used to. The corporates are really tight. I mean, I remember doing a party in Davos for the now defunct, a now defunct bank, I went to, and I lined an entire room in faux sable. Wow. I mean, just at the World Economic Forum. I mean, that was money just beyond belief. We had another one where we had the entire Philharmonic, because I can't say it, outside the National Gallery. But it was only there for when people left. So 30-piece orchestra for 10 seconds. And people ploughed lots of money into that sort of thing. I think people are much cannier. I think the dreaded Instagram, in fact, the 2 things that are really awful, the internet, Pinterest. Instagram is a good tool, but Pinterest, every bride in the world is a Pinterest bride. And they send you... Well, they just get onto it and they send you incredible photographs saying, I really love it. I had one the other day who asked me to do a table for 250 people for lunch in a meadow in Switzerland. And the photograph she had, which had obviously been manipulated, was of this long table with wonderful wildflowers all around it and blah, blah, blah. And I said to her, just tell me, when they're putting this table together, the staff are going to trample the whole thing down so it'll look like compost. And what happens if it rains? But she had in her mind this wonderful, wonderful image. And those things look great, but they always cost a fortune, and they don't always have the money.
So, I mean, in the early days, £1 million weddings just didn't really happen, whereas now they're quite common. Well, not common, but...
They do happen. They do happen.
They certainly happen more regularly. I mean, I'm certainly filming a lot more of these big sort of 2-day, 3-day destination events.
No, I agree. And there are lots of people who spend 5, 6, 7 million on a wedding. That's not out of the ordinary now.
How do you get inside someone's head when they come to you with that kind of budget? How do you know what's your process for sort of digesting a budget of that size and going, right, this is what we can do?
Well, of course, the great secret is they never tell you how much money they have. You ask them how much money they want to spend. Nobody ever tells you. In part because lots of people haven't done it before. If you're a father, you probably only have 2 daughters you're going to marry, and the first one, you haven't a clue how much it costs. And I'm good at spinning the dream, and so I say, well, we could do this, and we could float the dance floor on a piscine and blah, blah, blah. And then you give them the figures, and then they go, maybe not. And then you just coax it along, and it's like tickling a trout. And then eventually they go, all right, you wear them down.
But is budget important for a good party?
Well, it helps. Of course it helps. I mean, if you've got lots of money to spend, then it's makes a huge difference.
Tell me about some of the more unique things you've been able to produce for these parties, weddings? Things that you had to dream up because they'd never been done before?
I did a very big wedding in North America, and I met the bride with her mother, and the bride's opening comment to me was, "Everything will be fine as long as you keep her away from me." And I thought, oh God. And then I was taken to America. I was taken to their estate, which was a little bit bigger than Manhattan, and they wanted 600 people. And I was taken to the church, and I was taken to the hotel they were putting people up in. And I said, "I simply can't believe that you're dragging some of the richest people in the world halfway across it. And you're marrying your child in possibly the ugliest church I've ever seen. The hotel is simply hideous. And while your estate's amazing, it's not the right place." Anyway, I then went off to work in Rio, and I have a video in my head. So I'm able to look left and right and up and down, and the wedding we're doing here, I know exactly in my head how it's going to be. I was standing at Copacabana Beach, and I phoned the mother, and this was a really brave phone call. I said, I really think that I'm probably not the right man for this wedding. And she said, "That's very strange. I have withdrawn the save the date cards. I'm going to take the wedding. We're going to go to a different city, different hotel, different cathedral. I'm prepared to change everything, but not you." And I'm thinking, wrong answer. I don't want to do this wedding. Anyway, it turned out that they were absolutely charming. And we built this incredible structure in the middle of what had been a rock concert field, covered in mud. It was all dried. Tons of river rock brought in, miles and miles of new turf. We had somebody who, have you seen those candles that flicker? You know, Disney had the rights for those. And so we managed to get the rights to make these things. And so the candles were this size, and instead of being commercially, they were always fat. We'd actually got them so they looked like real candles. We dipped these things, 5,000 of them. So we put wire around them and dipped them into wax and put them into a deep freeze and dipped them into wax and put them into deep freeze. We got somebody in New York to computer generate the weight loading of 5,000 candles, 5,000 orchids in this huge structure. We had an amazing fireplace, quite like this, but jacked up 5 times the size, with what were in fact rubber bands, but we projected a fire onto it. So when the bride and groom danced towards it, smoke came out, they disappeared off into a nightclub with Cirque du Soleil as the cabaret and blah, blah, blah. It was extraordinary, but the real coup was that the bride and groom went on their honeymoon, and the bride's parents joined them 4 days later, and they are all blissfully happy. So I felt I had a bit of therapy as well.
What is the essence of the JLD, the Johnny Roxburgh design brand? What is it about what you bring that differentiates it?
The fact that I'm unbearably anal. I'm just detail. Every little bit of it matters to me. I think in colour. I employ very good contractors. I have one chap who he and I have been working together for years. And in the days of faxes, I remember saying to him, what I really want is a lion sitting on a plinth. And I drew, we were in our respective offices late at night, and I drew this lion. And I said, I'll fax you what I'm looking at. He said, well, I'll do one and I'll fax. When I looked at the fax machine, I thought my fax machine must be broken and that my fax had come back to me. It was extraordinary. We had the lion sitting the same way, the paw the same way, the tail curling. And having people that you can trust and that you rely on makes a huge difference. And I think that's part of the JRD brand. I've been doing it for so long. I have lovely staff.
Have you ever thought about giving it up?
Oh, every day. I thought about it today when I came and saw the windows in the tent and stood there going, who on earth thought those windows were a good plan? Get rid of them.
So what keeps you going there? I mean,
poverty.
You're 70 going on.
Poverty. I'm always terrified to wake up one day and find I've got no money. I'm sure that's something about being a Scot. No, no, what would I do? If I retired, I don't want to sit around dribbling in my own you-know-what. I think that would just be hideous.
But you're married, you've got a wonderful husband. Has being married changed your output to life?
Yes, of course.
Your thinking of life, has it changed the way you approach work?
It makes it easier because you have somebody who's on your team who is not uncritical. Because I think that in married life, but my father always said to me, when you get married, if you each give 60% and you each take 40%, your marriage will be perfect. He also said, never marry somebody you could live with, only marry somebody you couldn't live without. I think those are two very sort of slightly hallmark things, but they're true. And Giles is amazing. You know, he says, I think that's not such a good plan. We were in Scotland doing the golf for Dunhill this week, and we had hundreds of photographs and pictures to hang inside the pavilion. And he has a great eye, and said, that's too high, that's too low. And at the end of the day, it looked, so it's sort of teamwork.
So he comes to you on all the jobs that I've...
Lots of them, yeah, which is good. And we travel together. If we didn't travel, we'd never see one another.
I said earlier on that you were one of the originals. I mean, literally, there was Liz Adson, you, maybe Perry. I mean, very
not very many of us.
Not very many. And yet today, everyone seems to be a planner. What's your view on the explosion of the number of people who have started to think?
I always think it's marvellous that the young... Doesn't that sound lovely? It's marvellous that the young are having a job. No, I think it is marvellous that there are lots of people. I think that there are a lot of people who are planners who sort of know what they're doing. There are definitely some that do know what they're doing. There are a whole lot of them that are not very sure about it.
Who would you put up right there at the top? People you go, do you know what? I respect what they're doing.
Oh, I think it's in different fields. I love the work of Nicolas Barrelier, who's in the south of France, who does amazing flowers. I like the work of Jean-Charles Vanneck in Paris. He's a mate, and he's very good at doing what he does. In London, what's that lovely? See, the worst thing about getting old is you can't remember people's names. Italian. Riccardo Lanza. Yeah, they are very good at doing what they do. They're very, very good at doing what they do. And they're very charming. And in rather an irritating way, it helps hugely that he's incredibly handsome. And doesn't sort of have that kind of mothball look that I have now that I'm so old. And they're really good at it. But it seems to me that there are a lot of people who are planners, but they have no creative skills. They get people together, but they themselves don't actually produce what the party's all about. I, by contrast, and this is not, it's not to say that I have any great talent, although the Almighty, I think, was kind. But I think it's being able to create, it's being able to be passionate and to dream and to visualize. And I think that's what makes what I do unique. Or it may not be unique, but it certainly helps. Because when you come to me, you're not getting a whole lot of other people's ideas put together. You're getting my ideas and the client's. And that of course, is the other thing that's really important. You need to be distilling the client's ideas and make them work, rather than superimposing your ideas on them. There's a very famous book written by J.M. Barrie, who strangely wrote The Admirable Crichton, which was a play, but he also wrote Peter Pan. And the book he wrote, which should be given to every bride to give to her husband, and it's either a book or a play, I think it's a book, and it's called What Every Woman Knows. And of course the big trick, and this, you can't say, I'm going to say it anyway, but you can't say these things nowadays because it's all,
PC.
It's all, you can't do this, you can't do that. The truth is that while the balance of work and in certain areas of society, the balance of work has changed. Strangely, with the very rich, it tends to be, not always, says he trying to pussyfoot around, but often it's the men that are very successful and run very big corporations, and the wives who are there to do all the bolstering and the entertaining and the making their husband's career fly, which somehow in this day and age is regarded as being something that's not very important. I think it is unbelievably. I mean, that and rearing children must be two of the most important things that any human being can do. Anyway, what every woman knows is all about a wife making the husband think that all the decisions that are being made are his, but the reality is they're hers. And I think that in terms of entertaining, she may say that to the husband, "Oh, but we'll do this and we'll do that," but outwardly, it is looked on as being his idea to make him feel all puffed up. But a really clever woman makes it work.
Is that why you called yourself the Admirable Crichton then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you in the metaphor, you are the woman who allows the client to believe they're the ones coming up.
No, it was called the Admirable Crichton because the play was made into a very famous film, and at the time that we were starting out, the film was a box office smash, and I wrote to the trustees of J.M. Barrie and I said, "Can we use the name?" And they said, "Well, when you're successful, you must take us all out for dinner." I don't think I ever did that, but I'll be quite mean. But you know, it was all about a butler. A family gets shipwrecked. The butler has been down here on the desert island. The roles are all reversed. The family are completely hopeless, and the butler takes over and marries one of the daughters. And you know, that was it was just always being there, always making it work.
But I quite like the idea that being the planner is the secret is to let the client think they're the ones coming up.
Oh, of course. And also, the other thing you must never, ever, ever do as a planner, you must never believe your own publicity. Now, I have a PR machine behind me that is constantly putting me here, there, and everywhere. But you never, ever, ever should forget that you are staff. You can be friends with your clients. You can kiss them and measure the man's inside leg, or, I mean, we had one the other day when an Arab bride, and I say the word Arab bride only because it's relevant, because she was performing her zephyr, you know, when they come in. We had it at the Natural History Museum. It was so hot. She was wearing a Dolce & Gabbana dress that was all covered in roses, and it was strapless across here. Anyway, the stairs are like that at the Natural History, and there's a central staircase, and at the bottom was the bridegroom. And it was in July, and the Natural History is, you perhaps don't remember this, but there used to be a thing called a chicken brick made of terracotta. You put a chicken inside and you cooked it. Natural History is entirely made of terracotta, so it was baking hot. And the girl had makeup was running off her face. And anyway, she stepped forward into the lights to walk down, and this dress just slipped seamlessly over her breasts. And there is this poor child standing there with both her tits out at the top of the staircase. I grabbed her and said, "It's absolutely fine, I'm gay." And pushed the thing in, hauled the dress up, stuffed her tits back in. My housekeeper was there, and I said, "For God's sake, get a safety pin and put this girl back together again." But you have to do all kinds of things.
Why did you leave the OC? Why did you leave the Admirable Crichton?
I had been working for 35 years. We had 60 staff. I don't know if you've ever dealt with lots of staff. It's a nightmare. It's they're like children. It's like herding sheep. And as an employer, I used to hear people coming up to me and saying, "I can't get on with so-and-so." And I would look at them and I go, "You're an adult. Do you want me to come and wipe your bottom? Should I go and buy your ticket to get you across the bus lane?" it was a very expensive animal to feed. We paid some of our staff a great deal of money. I think, in hindsight, probably too much. And I had, in the last year, I traveled 172 days out of the 365, all over the world. And I had worked 32 of the 52 weekends that are in the year, with no days off in between. And Giles looked at me and said, we have a house in the country. And he said, if you don't stop, I'm going to be standing around your grave, because it's physically impossible to do all this stuff. And it was a catering company as well as party company. Dealing with chefs is very, very difficult. They're a strange breed, and you get a great chef, and the company is absolutely made, and then you get that chef leaves because if they're good, somebody poaches them, and then you have to find somebody else, and you are literally only as good as your last meal. And I always say that, when I was having a bad day, I can go and sit in a corner and put my head on my hands and say, it's not such a good day. I've been out partying the night before, and you just sit quietly. If you're a chef and you produce food, the food is there. It's on the plate. And if it's not good, then... And people always love to spread bad news. If you do an event, and of course it happens, people are human, and the food comes out and it's not so good, 360 people will say, went to an Admirable Crichton dinner last night, the food wasn't that great. But if the food is very good, maybe only 5 will say, we went to an AC dinner, as usual, the food was incredible.
My mother always used to say that one bad job makes up for 100 good ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are literally only as good as your last job. And that's why you can never, ever, ever take your foot off the accelerator in this life.
So did you feel you had to remove yourself from that environment and start again?
I was just sort of over it. I was over the whinging and the difficulty and also the financial balancing. Every January you woke up and you said, and it didn't matter if you've done 16 million the year before, you had to do 16 million again. And in the business that we're in, it's not necessarily repeat business. People will have big parties for a wedding, a big birthday like me, my 70th birthday, but that doesn't happen every year. And you have to find somebody who's going to pay you 5 million every year.
But your name was synonymous with the Admirable Crichton. It was like one is the other. It was the DNA were interlinked. How difficult was it for you after you left to set up Johnny Roxburgh Designs and create your own new thing?
Not difficult. I don't know what else to say. But no, of course it wasn't. Of course it wasn't difficult because
Clients came with you.
I took with me what the Almighty had generously put between these 2 ears. I still have my eyes. I remember doing a job in the south of France and being carjacked. And we were traveling between Monte Carlo and Cannes, and we stopped at the Feu Rouge, and this car, I had all the cloths for Coca-Cola in the back of my car. And I had one of the girls that worked with me, and we had a Mercedes-Benz, which when you hire cars in France, I don't know if it's still the same, they have different number plates. They have a 6 in them or something. Anyway, stopped at the Feu Rouge, and I got out, and this girl said to me, just take the key with you. I don't know why I did that. And I thought, I wonder what on earth this is all about. And I went up, and I opened the door, and the door was then pushed out, and these 3 lads came out, and they sprayed stuff in my face. They went round and they grabbed the other door. They took the girl, they grabbed her hair, they pulled her hair out. And my first thought was they put super glue in my eyes or some kind of glue. And I was thinking, I'm never going to be able to see again. And I remember this so clearly. I'm never going to be able to see again. I'm never going to be able to work again. But then my next thought was they then rushed round to the car to try and steal the car. I've got all the cloths for Coca-Cola in this car. I can't possibly let that happen. And then, I had the strength of 10 men. And I took the lad that was in the driver's seat. I kicked him in the balls. I smashed the door against his leg. It was like I was suddenly Superman. And I was so physically strong. I didn't know, I guess that's adrenaline or something. But I was just, I would have killed the bugger. And then
I never knew that.
Then they ran away, and their accomplices were sitting up at the traffic lights in a cafe, and we sort of pushed the car. We couldn't really see anything. We sort of got the car, and the traffic kept on going. Nobody seemed to bother. It was not very French. And then I went up to the cafe, and this man said, "Whatever else you do, don't wash your eyes." And of course, it was advice I should have done, but it was mace. And I don't know if I had mace, but it's unbelievably uncomfortable. And it makes your eyes sting. And of course, I took water and it just makes it all run down your head and into your eyes. Well, so anyway, I phoned up the friends I'd been having dinner with, and suddenly 10 French policemen arrived. And one of them looked at me and said, "You are mad." He said, "Those sort of people have knives and guns. They want your car. They wouldn't think twice about slitting your throat or shooting you." And what they do is they take the cars, and the cars are in Marseille, and they're in North Africa and
When was
this? Oh, I would think probably 12 years ago. Right. But it was strange how you're just given such enormous amounts of strength, but it was all about these bloody tablecloths. What was I thinking about?
But that sort of strength you kind of needed when you were left the AC. You started again with a blank sheet of paper. And JRD, Johnny Roxburgh Designs, was born. And after 5 years now, I think it is, your name is as flying as high as ever. I mean, you said you're approaching your 70th part. Well, you've had your 70th, but you're having your party later this year. What's the future? How long will you be doing this for?
Well, I have a great theory. There are lots of people, lots of men in particular. I don't wish to sound sexist, but I think that women often have other interests. They may do their jobs, but they have their children. And I'm not saying, as I walk the tightrope of whatever, I'm not saying that men are not interested in their children. But because of the relationship between women and their children, I think there is a bond that is unique. And I think that women have their children, they have their grandchildren, they have maternal instincts, they probably love to cook, they look up after their gardens. These are all things that men do as well. But I think that a lot of men are defined by their business, their position in society. You're the director of a company, you are defined by being the chairman of something. You walk out of that office age 65 and suddenly you're no longer. I mean, it was interesting, when I left the AC, I thought that my name was bigger than the AC. And I found, for a little while, until it all was established, I'd have to say people, I founded the Admirable Crichton, they say, "Yes, I know who you are." But now, of course, they don't have to do that. Anyway, but lots of men are defined by their job. And 18 months after they die, after they've retired, they play golf. They sit around, and the Almighty says, "Bang." I don't want to do that. I'd rather keep on working, I love what I do. I love traveling, I love meeting people, I love doing stuff. And then one of these days, and it could be, I could walk out of here and stand at the staircase of Spencer House, and suddenly, that would be a great way to go. I don't imagine I'll do it. I mean, nobody wants a fairy when she's 40. So I'm sort of guessing. Although Pierre Sinahon in Paris, he went on till he was 83. And Liz is, I wouldn't say how old she is, but she's no spring chicken. She's older than I am by quite a bit, but she's still working.
Did your parents get to see your success?
Well, my mother died when I was 7, but my father did.
Was he proud of you?
I hope so. I hope so. He liked the fact that he sort of used to say to me, how have you managed to get a royal warrant? How did you manage? And strangely, just 2 hours ago, Michael Fawcett, who was the Prince of Wales' right-hand man, and I saw him in a cafe just now. We were laughing, and I had the Prince's warrant, and he used to do all the parties for the Queen at Christmas at Buckingham Palace, and he did lots of work for them. And I've married them, I've buried some of them, all kinds of things.
Well, Johnny, it's been an incredible 40 years, and you haven't stopped yet. But I just want to say thank you very much for sitting down and explaining a little bit about your life. It's been a fascinating...
Thank you for asking me to be here. I've loved it. And thank you also for doing it in this wonderful, wonderful setting.